Om Shri Sai Ram Gita Vahini by Bhagwan Shri Satya Sai Baba. Chapter 6. All must obey the rule of action or karma. Krishna described the characteristics of the Sthita Prajna and the excellence of that stage from the 56th shloka of the second chapter to the 72nd shloka. Then the Lord said, I myself had established Jnana Yoga for the Sankhyas and Karma Yoga for the Yogis as means of attaining mukti or liberation. No one can survive even for a second without engaging in karma. Everyone has to bow to the demands of Prakriti or nature and engage himself in karma. It is inevitable, so do the kartavya karma, that is your bounden duty. Being engaged in karma is to be preferred to not being so engaged. If you desist from karma, the task of living becomes difficult, nay impossible. The karmas that do not bind are those usually referred to as yajnam or sacrifice. All the rest are bondage-producing ones. Therefore, O Arjuna, give up all attachment and engage in acts only as performing yajnas, sacrifices dedicated to the Lord. Krishna taught Arjuna the origins of karma, the roots from where the urge to do karma sprouts and grows. He taught them so clearly that Arjuna's heart was really moved and modified. Krishna explained, the Vedas emanated from Paramatma, the Supreme Being. Karmas emanated from the Vedas. From karma originated yajnam. From yajnam, rain. And from rain grew food. From food came all living beings. This is the cycle that has to be accepted and honored. There is no other choice whatsoever. Consider this, O Arjuna. I have no need to do any karma. No, not anywhere in the three worlds. I am under no compulsion. There is nothing I gained or will gain by engaging in karma. Despite this, I am myself ever engaged in karma. Think of this, if I desist from karma, the world will be no more. Moreover, I will be the cause of that evil fate. With an intellect illuminated with self-awareness, dedicate all acts of yours to me with no desire for the fruit thereof, no attachment or sense of possession or pride. Engage in battle, commanded Krishna. If the cycle of creation of God is to proceed in a smooth manner, each one has to keep on doing karma. Whoever he is, he cannot get around this obligation. Even a Paramagyani, he who has achieved the highest jnana, has to observe this rule. Eating and drinking, intake and release of breath, these two are karmas. Who can exist without these acts? You derive benefit from the world and from the community, and so some activity on your part is their due. In short, O Arjuna, the Brahma Anandam, this Vishwam, that is creation, is really speaking a huge workshop. Every human being is a limb or a part in this huge workshop. Each limb is allotted a task that is appropriate to it. So, each individual has to engage in that assigned task, taking it as Paramatma Karma. Arjuna, there is no single object or a being in the universe that does not engage itself in this great task of karma. Plant and insect, stone and stump, wind and rain, heat and cold, all are engaged in karma. The sun and the moon carry on their tasks strictly. If they stop doing their karma, the world cannot function. Wind and fire have to perform their duties, else the world cannot subsist. If the earth and sky refuse to follow their allotted duties, the world cannot survive. Is the point clear to you? So, there is no one who is karma less, and yet with a body. It is only when each performs his task without fail and with care that the cycle of creation will move undisturbed. Arjuna, you may wonder why Gyanis or enlightened ones need to do karma. Not only you, but everyone may have the same doubt. Well, people usually follow the ideals set by those in higher levels. Their acts form the basis of dharma or right conduct for all. They have an eminent role to play. If Gyanis sit quietly saying, "We have no need to do karma, we have had every experience, we do not need to associate with any karma, we do not have to deal with them, etc." How are ordinary mortals who are steeped in ajnana or ignorance to save themselves? Such a scenario will undoubtedly lead to dharma glani or decline in the practice of dharma. Therefore, for the sake of dharma, samrakshana, that is sustaining the practice of dharma, the duty of the wise is to foster dharma by practicing it first and leading others to follow dharma karmas. The wise have to do and get done, see and demonstrate only when the ignorance might be persuaded to learn, at least to some extent, and follow the example set by them. Arjuna, pay attention to just one fact. How warm is your body now? It is 98.4 degrees. How and far? What reasons did it happen? Because the sun bears many million times this heat at that distance, is it not? Now, if the sun feels that it will not put up with all that fire and become cool, what will happen to mankind? Just imagine. Similarly, if I desist from karma, this vast Vishwa karma of working eternally in and through this universe, imagine what will be the fate of this Brahma Anandam or macrocosmos. That is why I am engaged in karma incessantly. Remember, not that I derive any profit thereby or get any good or any fruit. Arjuna, most of the people in the world are karma adhikaris. They are so immersed in ignorance that they are neither aware of their own qualification or right, nor the importance of following the dharma karmas. Such can be saved only by being led and inspired by the example of the great. That is why the Gyanis too have to be engaged in activity and with their guidance help to remove sloth and delusion of ordinary men who are ignorant. So all have to obey the rule of karma without any deviation. Does the Vimanam or aerial vehicle stay on above, denouncing the earth below? Those who have earned the right to travel in it cannot fly towards it and into it. Therefore, to take them in, it has to come down at the places where they gather by previous arrangement and then soar high into the sky with them. So too, though the Jnani has no desire or urge to do karma, he comes down into the region of karma and guides the deserving ones to progress upwards, to uplift the ignorance and save them from the destructive influence of the adharma karmas. Jnanis must humble themselves from the superior state, move among the common folk, and engage in karma. Even great personages like Janaka performed dharma karmas with this view. Noble-minded Ashwapati too did likewise to save the rest from sheer idleness or wickedness. Then, in reply to another question of Arjuna, Krishna said, "Kama or desire is the root cause of all sins and all evil." He elaborated on its nature, cause, and cure in the 3rd chapter. He said, "He who is bound by the Deha Atma Buddhi finds it extremely difficult to conquer this Kama. One must acquire the Brahma Atma Buddhi in order to be sure of victory in conquering Kama. To acquire Brahma Atma Buddhi, all acts must be performed in the spirit of dedication to the Lord, and this entire Vishwam or creation must be regarded as the form of Vishnu, the universal, transcendent. Karma Mimamsa starts in the 3rd chapter and ends in the 5th chapter. In this 3rd chapter, 3 important subjects have been clarified. Number 1, everyone has to do karma, and if this is not done, the world will come to naught. Number 2, the performance of the karma of the great and experienced personages is the ideal that the rest have to keep in view. 3, most of the people in the world are karma adhikaris. So, they have to be inspired by the example of the great, and that is why the Gyanis too have to engage in karma. Krishna most lovingly made Arjuna imbibe these lessons. He did not just stop there. He went on to say that Jnana is the final goal and gain of karma. Jnana is also the best fruit of cleansing the impurities of the mind. Jnana itself is the ultimate shower of grace bestowed by the Lord. Jnana is not only the means to attain Ananda or bliss, but is also an Ananta Dhamam or eternal abode. Explaining thus, Krishna started teaching Jnana Margam or the path of Jnana to Arjuna. Jnana Yoga shines as a precious jewel amidst the teachings of Bhagavad Gita Shastra. Krishna declared, Nahi Jnananena Sadrasham Pavitramiha Vidyate. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as Jnana. Even later in the 7th chapter, he has said, Jnana Tvattameva me matam. I consider the Jnani as myself. Similarly, the excellence of Jnana Yoga has been extolled in many other contexts, also in the Gita. That is why Jnana Yoga is believed to be the most fruitful of all spiritual sadhanas. All Shastras find their fulfillment in Jnana alone. It is only the self that remains after Jnana, Swarupa Sandhanam, connecting to one's true self through self-knowledge, that is Jnana. Everything exists in self and self exists in everything. That absolute existence itself is self. Getting to this conviction through inquiry into the nature of self is called Jnana. What is important is neither renouncing karmas nor doing karmas, because despite the activities of the Deha or body, Manas or mind, Buddhi, intellect, Chitta, memory, Indriyas, senses, etc., one's true self is unaffected and unassociated. Similarly, even if these faculties are inactive, it too does not belong to Atma. Such realization or awareness is what is called Jnana. Every single act must be carried out with this underlining Jnana. That Jnana or awareness of the Atma enlightens both the paths, Pravritti and Nivritti. That is in outward progress and inward progress, augments astikata or theism and leads man to the realm of mukti or liberation through the road of nishkama karma. So, to attain moksham or liberation, Jnanam is the direct path. Therefore, it is declared that Jnanam is incomparably sacred, and naturally it follows that Ajnanam or ignorance is indubitably the most despicable. See, Samasti is in Vyasti, microcosmos or individual existence, and Vyasti, oneness or one existence, in Samishti or macrocosmos. That is the essence of Jnana. For all kshetras or bodies, there is only one Kshetrajna, or the knower of the field or body. And who is that Kshetrajna? The Atma. That is to say, you yourself, your own self. Realizing this is the Jnana, and realizing that the Atma is Paramatma, creator, the universal soul, is the Vijnana. Krishna, who is all-knowing, began to teach Arjuna this Jnana Yoga in order to cast off all doubts from his mind. Arjuna, I taught this sacred Jnana Yoga to Surya, or the sun god. Then it was handed down from one generation to another till Manu and Ikshvaku, and from them Raja Rishis came to learn it. With that, it was lost in the world. That Avaya, indestructible yoga, had to be restored to the world, and so I had to come, determined to carry out the task, said Krishna. Now, you will not fail to notice the discrepancy of the yoga being described as Avaya and the statement that it was lost. Of course, the statement has some reason behind it. It is not made without thought. The indestructible is here spoken of as having been lost or destroyed. It is called indestructible or Avyaya yoga because it contains two indestructible fruits. What are those two fruits? This is yoga. This yoga originates from the Veda, and the Veda is indestructible. Second, the consequence or the fruit of the yoga is moksham, which too is indestructible undoubtedly. This yoga, which contains these two indestructible fruits on account of the unfortunate events of time and the passage of time, fell out of use and so was forgotten and neglected. That is to say, it disappeared. It was lost to view. That is the implication of that statement. Otherwise, it is indestructible. Bringing it back or restoring it means bringing it once again into use, not creating it ab initio. Lost to view is the sense in which the word destroyed is used in a general way. Similarly, restoring is the sense in which the word creation is a mundane expression. That is how you have to interpret it, for the Lord will never devise a thing that will suffer destruction. The reference to Surya or sun god is also a subject that merits some consideration. The people of Bharat or India are intimately associated with the sun god. From the time immemorial, not only the valiant Kshatriyas of Bharat are associated with Surya, but for ordinary men and women also Surya is so highly regarded that he has been raised to the status of the glory. The Mula Purusha of the Kshatriyas is the sun god. The sacred scriptures and legends of India have not assigned a status of similar glory to anyone else. It is a unique position that Surya occupies. Why? For the whole world, the sun is the visible manifestation of God. The entire world functions because of Kalam or time, and the sun is the source of time. Hence, metaphorically, the Shastras declare that Surya is the father of Kaluda, the Lord Yama, who strictly works in accordance with time. Every single person's life is bound to time. So, the sun is the Adharam or basis of life, and also the Aradhya, Devam, beloved deity. Whether one wills or not, every deed of his is performed under his, that is, sun's auspices and dedicated to him. No one can avoid doing so. The sun limits and regulates the number of years each one lives. The sun diminishes every day a fraction of the allotted span. Above all, consider the service of the sun does to this world. That is the daily experience of all. Everyone is witness to that. The sun is the source of all life, plant and animal. Upon this planet, without his rays, it will be a desolate waste. He draws up into the sky the water of the seas and lakes, and from the clouds formed by him, he pours down rain in the regions that befits the fruits of the people's dharma karmas. He is ever the dharma devata, or the presiding deity of dharma, scattering his rays equally on all without any discrimination and illuminating everything he comes across. Surya is the great Tyagi. Unequal in renunciation, he is the great yogi who, without a second's thought of his own glory or rest, performs his duty without any thought or expectation of reward. He is humble and does his work quietly. The service he does to the world is something no one else can offer. The happiness he contributes is something no one else can confer. But he has no pretensions to pride. He moves about unconcerned with the consequences of his energizing mission of service. He never ponders with pride what calamity might occur in the world if I do not shine. Imagine the patience with which the sun puts up with all that extreme heat for the sake of the world and of humanity. One cannot even imagine the plight of the world without his services if he considers all of his tasks as exhaustive and stressful. It is he who keeps the human body warm and comfortable at the right temperature by absorbing the rest of the heat. From this, it is evident that he is the one protecting the human body. He infuses a portion of his energy into the human body to keep it active. Otherwise, it will become an inanimate and useless piece of mass. If the sun is annoyed and disinterested for a moment, the world will be consumed in flames. Instead, he is fostering the world with great consideration and patience. He feels his karma as his very innate nature and not as his service to others. It is only in the karma that is performed out of your original nature that you can have orupu or forbearance. If it is just an assumed duty, one will find it difficult to be at peace. Assumed duty is called asahaja karma, or the karma having no correlation with one's innate nature. And karma, that is the expression of one's genuine self or nature, is sahaja karma. Now, sahaja karma will sit light without any worry. Asahaja karma will always be burdensome. Asahaja karma will induce conceit, the feeling, I am the doer. So, it will result in exhaustion or worry, disgust or pride. Sahaja karma is free of all these things. Think of this one point. When a man is well, no one will inquire about the reason for his happiness. But if he is stricken with illness or sorrow, everyone will inquire the reason for his sorrow and bombard him with anxious queries. What is the reason? Man's fundamental nature is happiness. His nature is joy. That is his sahaja swabhavam, innate quality or nature. So, when he is happy, no one is surprised or worried. But grief and sorrow are not his swabhavam. So, when he is stricken with sorrow, everyone is worried and bombard him with several questions. Grief and sorrow are the result of some bhranti or delusion that gives rise to all kinds of vikaras or disorders, illnesses. Otherwise, they do not belong to him. So, the sun is clearly teaching us that when one is himself, true to his nature, there will be no delusionary vikaras such as exhaustion or burden, disgust or pride. The task of Surya is not something unnatural. That is why he continues to perform his task silently, unadvertised, systematically and smoothly. He is also exhorting mankind to use the time that he creates and allots fully and fruitfully by commissioning it as their lifespan and guiding them not merely for living comfortably and safely, but for living a moral and elevating life worthy of the destiny that is man's due. He is highly virtuous, a great Tyagi, and a Nishikama Karma Yogi. Now you can realize why the Lord taught Gita to the sun, or else can an ordinary one be a recipient of the Gita? Lord Krishna is now teaching this indestructible Gita Shastra to Arjuna, the representative of man, at the crossroads and he chose him for he has the same qualities like sun, is it not? Reflect on that for a moment. If Arjuna was not a vessel endowed with such virtues and splendor, Lord Krishna would not have decided to use him as the recipient of the Gita. The Lord will not confer such gifts to the undeserving. It is beyond doubt that Arjuna embodies the qualities needed for receiving the teaching, and so he was chosen. Jai Sai Ram.
साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात्। ॐ साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात्। ॐ साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात्। ॐ